Before we go to questions, we're delighted to have the 16th Senator from the state of Utah, a member of the Joint Economic Committee, the chairman of the Senate Steering Committee, and something that sounds like the day before yesterday, 1997, he graduated from BYU Law School, and clerked as Sam Alito's clerk on the court, author of the Our Lost Constitution and Freedom Agenda, a man that we all know and love. Ladies and gentlemen, the Senator from Utah, Mike Lee.
Thank you very much. It's such an honor to be here with so many luminaries within the conservative movement, people who understand me. You know, we, like I say, as human beings, we like to be around people who get our jokes, who think like we do. In my case, I particularly enjoy being around people who appreciate the need for constitutionally limited government. It's one of the reasons why I like spending time with my family. I generally like to think that the indoctrination from an early age had worked. Sometimes I don't know. Recently, I was talking to my 17-year-old daughter, Eliza. 17-year-olds are not always inclined to think their parents are right on everything. I was asking Eliza one day, just out of curiosity, would you ever get a tattoo? I wanted to see what her response was. You see, we have a no tattoo rule in our house, and I wasn't sure what the reaction would be. She said, no, well, yes, maybe. And I said, well, what would it be? And she said, if I were ever to get one, it would be a small X. Why an X? It'd be a small X, because one would represent the horizontal axis, separation of powers, the other, the vertical axis, federalism, and my heart melted. She knows how to melt her father's heart, to be sure. Look, the American people are not exactly having their hearts melt for us right now. They are understandably frustrated with us, particularly within the conservative movement, but also among Americans generally. The American people elected a Republican president, a Republican Senate, and a Republican House, hoping and expecting and having every reasonable expectation that we would in fact make good on our promises, that we would repeal Obamacare, that we would bring about bona fide regulatory reform, and that we would secure our borders, and that we would take hold of out-of-control federal spending. Have all of those things happen? No. Have any of those things happened to a significant degree? Not really. And to make matters worse, to add insult to injury to the very people who put us in power, the Senate's working a really anemic schedule. Typically, our votes start on Monday afternoon, late Monday afternoon. Typically, we cast our last votes of the week on Thursday afternoon. This is unacceptable, and it's particularly insulting to the American people, most of whom work 5 or 6 or 7, what feels like 8 days a week, just trying to put bread on the table and trying to live within their means. But it's worse than that. It's not just that we're not working in the same way that they work, as much as they work. It's that we're working, requiring them to work longer. You see, they have to work months out of every year just to pay their federal taxes. That's time that they can't ever get back because we're not doing our jobs right. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm generally of the view that it's better when Congress is not doing more, in the sense that it's better when Congress is not adding to the burden carried by the American people. Anytime we're adding to that burden, we're making everything worse for the American people. So in some instances, congressional inaction can be a good thing. But we're not in that place right now. In order for us to live anywhere close to the Founding Fathers' vision for constitutionally limited government, for a prospering, thriving society, we've got to tear down some of what's been built up over time, and that's going to take time. It's going to take commitment by us. And it's sure as heck going to take more than the 3.5-day legislative work week or whatever you call it is that we do or pretend to do right now. Now, I recognize that for those in this room, there may be some division on a couple of ideas on how best to make Congress work. And there may be some in the room who believe that we should nuke the filibuster. I would argue that the filibuster is not, in fact, the problem. It is instead our unwillingness to work long hours and take votes, a lot of them, at a lot of inconvenient times, that makes the filibuster not work for us. The filibuster is, in fact, I believe, a friend to the conservative cause. But it is so if and only if we will use it for its intended purpose, namely to facilitate debate and to make sure that all members, including conservative members, have an opportunity to speak and to offer improvements to legislation. This also shows up not only in the legislative calendar, but also on the executive calendar, where we're supposed to confirm presidential nominees. At our current rate, we will have the Obama administration fully staffed in about 10 years, which is longer than this term of office will even last, longer than his second term of office will even last, if, God willing, he's able to get elected to a second term. Now, look, I will credit our Republican leadership in the Senate. I will credit Leader McConnell for confirming a whole lot of really good judges, including a whole lot of circuit judges. Currently, we have confirmed 1/8 of the total complement of judges serving on the circuit courts of appeals in the United States government. As a recovering appellate litigator myself, I can tell you that is an enormously helpful development and one that will benefit the American people for generations to come. But that isn't enough. There's a whole lot more to do, and I'm very troubled by the fact that although we're doing pretty well in that department, better in fact than any Senate and President working in tandem have done ever as far as I can recall, we're not using all the tools at our disposal to stop democratic obstruction. Far from it. Oftentimes, our Democratic leadership in the Senate will demand that we use all of what's known as the 30-hour post-cloture debate in the Senate. As you remember, in order to pass anything or confirm anyone in the Senate, you first have to get cloture. Cloture means you're voting to close debate. Typically on legislation, cloture requires 3/5. It's a different story now on the executive calendar. Long story, we don't need to get into that. But the 30 hours is there to be a ceiling, not a floor. It's not there to guarantee that we'll actually use all 30 hours. In fact, the way it's supposed to work is that if people actually want to debate a nominee during the post-cloture period, they have to show up and speak. And by the way, each senator is limited to only 1 hour per senator who wants to speak on that nominee. What we should be doing is when they require us to run 30 hours, which is a big part of what's taking us so long to get all these nominees confirmed, we should require them to actually show up, make them speak. If we made them speak, they would be in a big hurry to get these people confirmed so that they can go off and do whatever it is that they want to do. And if they don't show up to speak, we can actually call the question. We can call the vote, cutting short the debate which they have chosen not to have. We haven't been doing that. We need to do that. If we start doing it, it will make a big, huge difference. And so look, it seems to me that if they want to slow things down, they should be forced to show up and speak. But as long as we allow the Democratic senators to obstruct just for the sake of obstructing, we're going to get stuck in this loop. This has other ramifications across the board in what we do. Our spending bills, as Senator Perdue mentioned a minute ago, are a disaster. I watched in utter horror and agony about 6 weeks ago when I received on a Wednesday evening at precisely 8:35 p.m. a 2,232-page spending bill. Now, I immediately began reading it. I immediately began assigning different staff members to read different pieces of it so we could put our heads together the next morning and try to figure out roughly what the four corners of that massive document were. This is no small task. It doesn't read like a fast-paced novel. The House of Representatives had passed the darn thing before lunch the next day. The Senate passed it the following night in the middle of the night without one member having fully read it, without one member having fully understood it. This is a travesty and a tragedy, both at the same time. I might have accidentally just coined a new word. It reminds me a little bit of something I saw when I visited China a couple years ago. Anybody been to China, around Tiananmen Square? The National People's Congress has about 3,000 members. They meet once a year for just a couple of weeks. I'm told that almost all the power in that Congress is vested in a small handful of legislative leaders, and they decide basically what the agenda is going to be, and then the National People's Congress is there to rubber stamp it, and then they go do their thing. I don't ever want us to turn into that. And in fact, Article 6 of the Constitution prevents us from ever turning into that. It guarantees equal representation of the Senate, meaning every member of the Senate is supposed to have the opportunity to represent his or her state. When we allow a small handful of people, and I mean really small, small enough to fit on one or two hands, a small handful of people in the entire Congress write that 2,232-page spending bill, giving members no opportunity to review it, to debate it, to discuss it, most importantly, to amend it under the light of day in view of the American people. The Republican form of government is thwarted, and our system becomes meaningless. Now, we can do this. We can do this the right way. We just have to work harder. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm proud to stand with Senator Perdue, proud to stand with President Trump, and to the other 16 members of the Senate who have signed Senator Perdue's letter, saying, we have no business taking a recess in August. For that matter, I would add, we have no business taking a recess for the weekend or the week between now and then. But certainly, we have no business taking a recess in August, unless or until we pass a spending bill. Look, we've got 12 weeks left, 12 legislative weeks left before our current spending bill expires. We cannot fall for Lucy's little football trick again. Over and over and over again, we're told, sorry, we got to do it this way because we couldn't reach an agreement, so you're going to have to pass this bill. We know it's only 24 hours from the expiration of the spending period, but you've got to pass this, so you got to vote for it to pass it, or you can vote no. If you vote no, there might be a shutdown. If there's a shutdown, we will blame you for it. We cannot fall for that again. They've got to bring it up now. They've got to bring it up sometime early this summer. I don't care if it's, there is chronologically not enough time at this point to pass all 12 appropriations bills, but that isn't the most important part. I don't care whether it's 2 or 3 bills, or a dozen bills, or it's 1 bill. It might even be better to do it 1 bill right now, but if you throw in 1 bill and you subject it to an open amendment process, you allow every rank and file member of the United States Senate to have access to improving it, and whatever corresponding procedure they have in the House of Representatives. That is a Republican form of government. That's a form of government that our founding fathers envisioned. And that's one that empowers the American people and re-enlivens the conservative cause. I believe that a more open, a more transparent, a more rigorous process, one that involves making members show up to the floor to speak, making members cast votes even when, especially when they're difficult, making members work is what's going to work for the American people. It's time, my fellow Americans, to expect more. It's time to expect freedom. It's time to expect your U.S. senators to do their job. Thank you very much.